Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a really unsettling story you asked us about a horrific family murder case from Yongin, South Korea.
Yeah, it happened back in 2017, but it kind of resurfaced recently, 2023, when a Korean health influencer connected to the case spoke out.
Right. So we've gathered the sources you sent, and we're going to walk through what happened based on that information. It's quite a journey.
It really is. It starts with just a feeling that something's wrong and escalates dramatically.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. Yongin, it's a big city, right? Near Seoul.
Yeah, Gyeonggi province.
Yeah.
Population around 1 million. Maybe known internationally for places like Everland, the theme park.
Got it. So this story, according to the sources, really starts with a relative named Somi. She's worried because she can't reach her cousin Lee.
Or maybe older sister. The sources vary slightly. But the point is, Lee had been out of contact for about 2 or 3 days.
Which, as you said, is unusual. That immediate lack of contact feels like, well, the first red flag.
Definitely. Especially in close families. So Somi decides, okay, I need to check this out in person. She goes over to Lee's apartment in Yongin. This was October 25th, 2017.
And this is where things get immediately strange. Somi actually knew the code for the digital door lock.
Very common in Korea.
But she tries it, and then nothing. The code's been changed.
That's not just a red flag, that's a huge alarm bell, isn't it? Someone actively changed the code.
Combined
right with the silence.
Understandably, Somi panics. She calls 119, the emergency number.
Right. So the police show up.
Yeah.
But getting into the apartment isn't straightforward.
No. What was the issue?
Well, the door's locked, the code is changed, building management apparently couldn't help, standard keys weren't working. They were locked out.
So how did they eventually get in? This seems urgent.
It was. And they made a really, quite a dramatic decision. The sources say they decided to rappel down.
Rappel, like from the floor above.
Exactly. Rappel down from the balcony of the apartment directly above Lee's to get access through her balcony.
Wow. That shows how seriously they were taking it. Okay, so they get inside. What did they find?
The first thing that struck them, apparently, was how clean the place was. Unusually clean and tidy.
Which seemed odd.
Yeah, for a family home with 3 people, including a teenager, you'd expect some level of, lived-in mess.
Yeah.
This felt sterile, almost like someone had cleaned up deliberately.
Healing thought. Okay, so they start searching.
And an officer goes into the master bedroom. That's where he sees it.
Sees what?
A rolled-up duvet. Or maybe a blanket on the floor next to the bed.
Okay.
And something about it feels wrong. The shape, maybe the weight. He gets closer and then he sees feet sticking out.
Oh, God.
4 feet. Clearly visible. He knew immediately there were bodies inside. 2 people.
Wow. 4 feet. So backup is called, obviously. They unroll the duvet.
And it's confirmed. It's Lee, Somi's relative, and her 14-year-old son, John.
Terrible. But the sources mention the state of the bodies was particularly horrific.
Yes. Extremely so. They both had severe stab wounds, neck and chest, but also their faces. They were severely mutilated, slashed.
Deliberately, the sources suggest.
It appeared that way. Police speculated it could have been to hinder identification, or maybe just sheer intense hatred from the killer. It was incredibly brutal.
And there was another strange detail, something about powder.
Yeah, apparently there was some kind of powder sprinkled around the bodies in the duvet. Police later wondered if it was connected to the killer's, personal beliefs. Maybe trying to contain spirits or something. Very bizarre.
Truly bizarre. Now, Lee lived there with her husband, who was John's stepfather, but he wasn't in the apartment.
Correct. He was missing from the scene.
Yeah.
Which, of course, immediately made the police suspicious.
Understandable. Was he a victim or somehow involved? They needed to find him.
Exactly. So the search began for the husband.
And it didn't take too long to find him, unfortunately.
No. About 3 days later, around October 28th, a report came in. A deceased man found inside a rental car. Different location, a condo complex, somewhere else.
And it was him, Lee's husband.
It was. And the injuries, they were horribly similar. Stab wounds, the same facial mutilation. It confirmed the same killer was responsible for all 3 deaths.
So it officially became a triple murder investigation.
Yes. 1 killer, 3 victims.
How did the police narrow down who this killer could be?
They started digging deeper. CCTV from the apartment complex, tracing that rental car. And then a crucial tip came from relatives.
What was that?
They mentioned Lee had another son from a previous marriage. His name was Seong-gwan, and he apparently visited his mother pretty often.
Okay, so they checked the CCTV for him.
They did. And bingo, Kim Seong-gwan, was on camera visiting the apartment on October 21st.
October 21st. Wait, that's 4 days before Somi found the bodies.
Precisely. And here's the critical part.
Yeah.
Lee basically dropped off the map, lost contact with everyone, right after Kim Seong-gwan left the apartment on the 21st.
So the timing points straight at him. He likely killed his mother and half-brother that day.
That's what the police strongly suspected. He became the prime suspect.
Kim Seong-gwan, he was 37 at the time. What else did the sources say about him, his background?
Well, people who knew him described him as kind of a mama's boy. Even though he was married himself, had 2 very young daughters.
2 daughters, wow.
Yeah, just 2 years old and 7 months old at the time. But he was still heavily reliant on his mother, Lee, financially. Apparently quite bad with money, always asking her for help.
And this seems to be the core of the motive, doesn't it? The money.
It really looks that way.
Yeah.
The sources indicate that in the couple of years before the murders, Lee had started saying no.
Refusing him money.
Yeah, she had her new family to support her husband, young John. Relatives said Kim was really unhappy about this. He felt like the money that should have been his was being diverted to them.
That sounds like deep resentment building up. Financial pressure plus feeling replaced or abandoned.
Exactly. That combination seems key, according to the investigation.
So police are now focused on finding Kim Seong-gwan, but he's vanished.
Yes. They quickly discovered he hadn't just disappeared locally, he'd fled the country.
Fled South Korea. Where did he go?
He went to New Zealand.
New Zealand. Why there?
Apparently he had studied there previously, so he knew the place, likely felt it was somewhere he could, lay low, and he didn't go alone.
He took his family.
Yes. His wife and their 2 little daughters went with him.
Okay, so he's trying to escape justice in New Zealand, but his behavior there, the sources say it was a bit strange.
Yeah, counterintuitive, really. Instead of hiding quietly, he starts renting a house, buying expensive things, like a Mercedes SUV, new furniture.
Where did he get the money for that? From his mother's accounts after he...
That seems to be the implication, though the sources focus more on the suspicious behavior itself. This sudden show of wealth, with no apparent job, started raising eyebrows in the local Korean community. People noticed.
He must have realized he was drawing attention.
Apparently so, because he then tried moving to an even larger house, maybe thinking it would make him seem more legitimate or just harder to track.
But that didn't work either.
Nope. Someone in the new area also got suspicious. They worried he might be involved in something illegal, given the circumstances, and reported their concerns.
To
the Korean consulate in New Zealand.
And that was the break the police needed.
It was. That report connected the dots. It led to cooperation between the police forces in New Zealand and Korea. And soon after, Kim Seong-gwan was arrested.
Right, arrested as the main suspect in the Yongin triple murder. When did they get him back to Korea?
He was extradited pretty quickly, relatively speaking, January 11th, 2018, so about 80 days after he first fled.
What about his wife and children?
His wife and the 2 daughters actually came back to Korea voluntarily, even before he was extradited, or maybe around the same time. The wife claimed she wanted to cooperate, and, crucially, that she knew nothing beforehand.
She maintained her innocence, said she had no idea what he'd done or planned.
Yes. She specifically claimed he never talked to her about having problems with his mother.
Okay, so Kim is back in Korea. He's confronted with the evidence. Does he confess?
He does. Kim Seong-gwan confessed to killing all 3 victims.
But he had a specific angle on his confession, didn't he?
He did. He tried to frame it as not premeditated. He claimed it was an accident, or rather, something done in a sudden fit of uncontrollable rage. He used the term bandal to say, like a crime of passion or impulse.
Okay, so let's hear his version of events, according to his confession. He goes to his mother's apartment on the 21st. Why?
For money. He said he was under huge financial stress. They argued when she refused him again. And in that argument, he claimed he just lost control, grabbed a knife he'd brought with him.
Wait, he brought the knife with him? That doesn't sound very impulsive.
Exactly. That's a key detail we'll come back to. But in his version, he lost control and killed his mother with this knife he happened to have.
And his poor half-brother, John.
According to Kim's confession, John, who was only 14, witnessed the murder of their mother. Kim said he felt he had to kill John too, to silence him as a witness.
Just horrific. What did he say he did right after killing them in the apartment?
He admitted to hiding the bodies, wrapping them in the duvet. He changed the door code, deliberately, to delay discovery, and he used his mother's phone to transfer money out of her account.
Again, changing the code, transferring money, seems quite calculated for someone who supposedly just snapped. What about the stepfather? How did that happen, according to Kim?
His confession detailed luring the stepfather out. The stepfather wasn't home at the time of the first two murders, so Kim called him.
What excuse did he use?
He pretended he needed business advice and asked the stepfather to meet him and drive towards Gangwon province.
Okay.
They drove together, and around 8 p.m., Kim pulled over at a rest stop in Pyeongchang. He specifically mentioned choosing it because it was secluded, no CCTV, no people around.
Deliberately choosing a blind spot.
Yes. And there, in the car, he killed his stepfather.
And after that?
He moved the body into the back of the rental car, drove back to the condo where he, his wife, and kids were staying, packed up their things, and then 2 days later, they were on a plane to New Zealand.
So his stated motive throughout this confession was basically resentment, feeling abandoned by his mother financially in favor of her new family.
That's the core of it, yes. Resentment that the money and attention weren't flowing to him anymore.
But as you've pointed out, the police weren't buying the whole impulse story. What was the evidence contradicting it?
Several things really stood out. First, bringing the knife. That suggests premeditation.
Right.
Second, the deliberate luring of the stepfather to that isolated spot. That takes planning. Third, the immediate actions after the murders in the apartment, hiding bodies, changing the code, transferring funds, not panic reactions.
And then they escaped to New Zealand.
Exactly. Fleeing the country like that requires forethought. It just didn't add up to a sudden loss of control. Police were convinced it was planned.
And their suspicions started to extend to his wife, too, right? That she might have known more or even been involved.
Yes, they started looking very closely at her role. And they found some pretty damning evidence. One major piece was a voice message from Kim to his wife. In it, he apparently said something like, "I've handled 2, 1 left."
Wow. Handled 2, 1 left. Clearly referring to his mother and half-brother, with the stepfather still alive at that point.
It seems undeniable.
Yeah.
And then there was her internet search history.
What had she been looking up?
Really alarming stuff. Things like how to dismember a body, searches involving hammers, excessive sleeping pills, and even fugitive procedures.
That paints a very different picture than I knew nothing. Dismemberment, fugitive procedures.
It strongly suggests she was, at the very least, aware of what was happening or being planned, and possibly researching ways to, well, deal with the bodies or facilitate the escape.
Was there a financial motive for her potentially being involved too?
Police certainly considered it. The sources mentioned the couple had quite a bit of joint debt, around 60 million won, maybe $50,000 USD equivalent back then.
Okay.
So the theory was maybe she saw this horrific plan as a way out of their financial hole using Lee's money. Maybe she pushed him or was at least a willing participant.
And her defense. It wasn't consistent, was it?
No, the sources mentioned conflicting stories. At one point, she apparently tried to claim that Lee, her mother-in-law, had threatened her children, almost justifying Kim's actions in a twisted way.
That seems unlikely given everything else.
Right. And then later, she shifted to claiming Kim had brainwashed her for years, that she was essentially his puppet, a victim herself who just wanted to get back to her kids. The courts had to weigh these inconsistent accounts against the evidence like the searches and the voice message.
It adds another layer of complexity. Beyond the crime itself, what kind of person was Kim Seong-gwan, according to those who knew him?
The sources mention he was known as a habitual liar.
A liar. About what?
Things like his job pretending to be a high-level construction executive when he was just a site supervisor. Or making up stories about inheriting large amounts of land from his grandfather. It suggests a pattern of deception, maybe to cover up his financial inadequacy or just general insecurity.
Which contrasts so tragically with how his mother, Lee, had treated him.
Absolutely. She raised him alone after his father passed away, clearly cared for him deeply. She's the one who funded his education in New Zealand, ironically.
Yeah, the place he fled to.
And she only remarried later in life, seemingly when she thought he was grown and self-sufficient. For him to turn on her like that, seemingly over money and resentment towards her new happiness, it's incredibly dark.
Okay, let's bring it back to why this case resurfaced in 2023. The health influencer who spoke out. Who is she again?
She's the daughter of the stepfather, the third victim. So Kim Seong-gwan killed her father. She's Lee's stepdaughter and John's stepsister, and she has a large online following.
Over 200,000 followers, the sources said, and she revealed something chilling.
Yes. She shared publicly that she used to visit her dad sometimes at that apartment in Yongin, and she realized she could easily have been there on October 21st. She narrowly avoided being the fourth victim purely by chance.
That's terrifying to contemplate. Why did she decide to speak out in 2023?
Primarily, it seems, to use her platform to make sure people didn't forget the brutality of what happened. To advocate for justice for her father, her stepmother Lee, and her young half-brother John. But there was also a specific pressing concern.
Which was?
Kim Seong-gwan's wife, the one convicted of complicity. Her prison sentence is ending.
She's due for release soon.
Yes, expected release in 2025. And the stepdaughter expressed profound discomfort and fear about the idea of the wife rejoining society, believing her to be complicit in the murders.
A completely understandable fear for a survivor. So let's recap the final court verdicts.
Kim Seong-gwan received a life sentence that was finalized in May 2018.
And his wife.
His wife, her name wasn't revealed in the sources we saw, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for complicity. The court clearly found the evidence against her, like the voice message and internet searches, compelling enough.
Did they appeal?
Yes, both of them appealed their sentences.
But the appeals failed.
Correct. Both appeals were rejected. The life sentence for Kim and the 8-year sentence for the wife were upheld.
Which leads us back to the wife's impending release in 2025.
Exactly. And it leaves this big question hanging, doesn't it? A question the sources suggest is still talked about in Korea.
The question of ultimate responsibility, beyond just Kim pulling the trigger, perhaps.
Yeah. Who was the driving force behind the planning, the cover-up, the escape? Was Kim solely responsible for the idea, fueled by his own issues? Or did the wife play a more active role, maybe manipulating him because of their debts, as her searches might suggest?
Or was she, as she claimed, manipulated by him, brainwashed and coerced?
It's that ambiguity. The wife still maintains her innocence in terms of planning, claiming she was a victim too. But the evidence, it leaves that nagging doubt. It's something for you, the listener, to mull over based on what we've laid out from the sources.
It really is a truly disturbing case with layers of tragedy and unanswered questions about manipulation and motive.
A very dark story indeed.
Well, that covers the information we have from the sources you provided on the Yongin family murders. Thank you for bringing this case to our attention for this deep dive.
It's important these stories are told, even when they're difficult.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, we hope this exploration was informative. If you have thoughts on this case, feel free to share them. And as the source material reminded us to mention, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Horror Docs if you appreciate their work compiling these stories.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll talk to you next time on The Deep Dive. Take care.